So TJ, you've gone deep in the woods of Maine. Yeah, doing the inner Stephen King thing. I don't know, maybe not as supernatural or ghoulish, but I could be wrong. What have you been writing about?
Embracing all things steel drums. Of course, you get to the woods and you write about manufacturing.
Just like Henry David Thoreau, right? That's
That's
what
right.
Walden's about, right?
That's right.
About the
Yeah.
industrial age and
His,
like,
his second book was on manufacturing. It just was not well received.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, he found a love of steel drums that just you know kind of took him away from Walden and brought him into a different world. But who is Nellie Bly?
Uh, so this is interesting. I guess I'll first of all say, by no means am I an expert in steel drums or necessarily in manufacturing, but from a conversation we had, digging deep into what does the history of the steel drum look like? Because there's a lot of competing facts out there. There's a lot of competing narratives out there. And I said, well, it's got to be a golden thread that we can pull through all of this and actually, come up with a definitive or as close to definitive history or retelling of the history as possible. And when I started at Greif, it was always, Nelly Bly, Nelly Bly. The book is in the lobby. It's in offices across the campus. And, you know, as we put that out there and as we talk about it, there are people that come out and say, well, no, it's actually this. Standard Oil is given credit, or it was actually an employee of Nelly Bly's company. And so uh, to put, it's a very long way of answering this question, but Nelly Bly is the patent holder for the steel drum as we know it today. But I guess the history of that is a little bit more sordid.
So you can't tell me who invented it. You can say who the patent holder is.
Well, so in my reading and in my digging deep and pulling the layers of history back, there actually is a guy who is credited as being the inventor. It's a guy named what is his name? His name is Henry Warehan. Wehrhan.
Hmm.
Warehan. No, and he was a supervisor or superintendent at the Ironclad Manufacturing Company, which was owned by Nellie Bly at the time. And so he invented it. He filed the patent. When he received it 2 years later, he named or assigned the patent to Nellie Bly. So they're both names are on it.
Fantastic loyalty there, then.
Employee of the month for sure. And then he did
Yeah.
it two more times. So it wasn't just one patent, right? There's actually three patents in the span of almost a year, and each one of those he included Nellie Bly as the patent holder.
That's fascinating. So what surprised you or fascinated you the most as you dug into steel drums?
Nellie Bly is not her real name.
Really?
No, no. Her name is Elizabeth Cochran, and she was a reporter for the New York, I think the New York World. It was either a magazine or a publication. And she's got a crazy history. She was actually probably one of, if not the first, sort of investigative journalist out there. Like she actually committed herself to an insane asylum and documented how they treated not only patients who were there for issues, but also women specifically. And then her book sort of took off, and it was this unbelievable. She almost was like a celebrity in her own right.
Wow. Okay, that is pretty surprising. So as you unpack that, right? What's one key takeaway? I guess you'd want your audience when they read what you've written. What do you want them to take away when they after they've read
So
it?
so two things really struck out for me in all of this. One is that Greif has been there since the very beginning of the steel drum, and really you could even take sort of the precursor, the end of the wooden barrel, and sort of overlap with the steel drum. Greif has been there since the very beginning, and we're able to actually sort of track back and look and see exactly certain key points during the oil boom that Greif was founded, and tie their growth to the growth of companies like Standard Oil, which were based in Cleveland, which is where Greif was found. So that's the first one that's really interesting. And then the second piece I would say is the question around why 55 gallons is the standard for a drum, right? And if you think about sort of the evolution of packaging, the evolution of sort of the measures and weights that we've gone through the years, and thinking about the idea that a wooden barrel has been around and been used and really been sort of the go-to packaging for like 1500 years, and then suddenly we have this new sort of invention in the 1850s, 1860s. um, there's a lot of there's a lot of discrepancies in sort of how that happened. But what I found to be most fascinating was that a wooden barrel, as we think about it, sort of a barrel of oil today, the standard is 42 gallons. So then you ask yourself, well, what's the disconnect between 42 gallons and 55 gallons? And you have to look at the shape of that barrel. That wooden barrel, sort of narrow at the top, those bilge sides that sort of pot bellied out and then hang back in, and all sort of wrapped together with those steel bands. As they were transitioning from wood to steel, they wanted to make sure that there was no sort of transportation difficulties or logistics around it. So they made the steel barrel the same width and height as the widest points and tallest points of the wooden barrel. But you don't have to have curved edges with a steel barrel. So you can go straight up. And the difference in the size is actually that the delta between 42 gallons and 55 gallons, hence 55 gallons. So when they talk about the cost of a barrel of oil to this day, and this standard was set. So the initial oil boom was 1859, Titusville, Pennsylvania. That sort of marked the very beginning of almost the birth of the oil industry. And the group of producers, the small group of producers at the time, came together, and they were using whiskey barrels because it's all they had. And if it was good enough for some precious liquids, it was probably good enough for other precious liquids. And so they came together and set a standard and said a barrel of oil was 42 gallons. And so to this day, when we talk about the cost of a barrel of oil, it's still the cost per 42 gallons.
Was there anything else that you learned in the process of this?
So I guess so touching on sort of the history of Greif a little bit, because I think that's really interesting, right? So the wooden barrel, sort of cream of the crop for packaging, the go-to packaging for the better part of 1,000+ years, hasn't really changed a whole lot in that time. And so when oil started being produced, like I said, they put it in whiskey barrels, and it's what they had. It was 42 gallons, and probably so so you have to look at why the wooden barrel was so successful, right? It's made of wood, pretty much get that anywhere at the time. It was relatively easy to assemble, right? And there's such thing as different types of cooperage that would sort of look at dry goods versus wet goods, and there's certain skill levels with trying to make a watertight or leak-proof one. And basically you could manufacture them anywhere, right? So if you had the right person and the right resource, you could pretty much make them anywhere. And that's why wood barrels were ubiquitous until the oil boom, right? And then you're putting out so much oil that they literally are running out of barrels. This is probably the first time, I don't know if this is true or not, but it from the intimation that I got from reading about this, it was almost the first time that supply or that demand outstripped supply. And so they were going so far as, so John D. Rockefeller, the founder of Standard Oil, was going so far as to purchase huge tracts of oak forest up and down the East Coast, and sort of cutting out the middleman and taking all that lumber and shipping it directly to Cleveland, so that way they could start making their own barrels. And the benefit of that was he could sort of meet the demands of his operations. He also was able to sort of streamline the supply chain and cut out costs. And so his barrel cost went from something like $3 a barrel to $1.50 barrel, which is huge. But if you're a fledgling company, any saving is going to be sort of a big impact. But it's interesting because they were shipping it to Cleveland specifically. And so I think at the time, 1870, when this was going on, of the 29 refineries in Cleveland, Standard Oil owned 26 of them. So by far the biggest player there. And so they're making their own barrels. They're dominating the oil scene locally and growing nationally. And then who are they going to turn to start making some of these barrels, right? So the Greif brothers founded Greif Cooperage at the same time, right? So what year was that they founded?
1877, right?
1877, right? So 1872, they owned 21 of the 26 refineries, or 26, I think I said 21 of 26 refineries. 1877, Greif gets started, and then you sort of track Standard Oil's growth and you look at Greif's growth with that, by 1908, Greif is the largest cooperage in the world, right? So this small wooden barrel manufacturer based out of Cleveland that got its start because of the oil boom is now one of the largest manufacturers. Then you fast forward to today, right? So now if you look at Greif's portfolio and our footprint, we are one of, if not the largest supplier of steel drums, right? So we've sort of evolved since the very beginning to sort of meet the demands of some of these really, really difficult markets.
That's fascinating. So we were born from the Industrial Revolution, and as society has moved into the industrial age, into modern, you know, living, modern life, we've been there every step of the way.
Since the beginning, almost day one.
Wow, that is pretty cool. It's a connection to the past, right?
Yeah.
It's fun to think about the that lineage and how, I have now something about me that I can tie to a time long before I was here, and being a history fan, that's pretty cool. I dig that.
It's interesting because, we got sort of our start. I guess you could say Greif got its start, during the oil booms and certainly shipping oil specifically, and played a long important part of that history and that growth. But if you look at today, sort of the oil markets today, we still talk about it as the price of oil per barrel, which again, 42 gallons, very interesting. But very little oil is actually shipped in barrels. With the advent of the tanker and pipelines now, very little is shipped in barrels. And so you sort of have this incredibly rugged, durable, leak-proof, efficient, shipping container or shipping packaging that you can use. And so, what do you put into it? And now the evolution of the steel drum is sort of started at the Industrial Revolution, started with oil, but now it's holding everything from nuclear waste all the way to sort of flavors and fragrances. So it's sort of taken on an entirely different use case than what it was born from.